6 months ago, I had a construction business that people in Denver actually respected. One I built with my own hands, from a dented pickup truck and a rusted toolbox to custom homes that families dreamed of living in. I had a husband I'd loved since I was a teenager. 2 children I would have died for without hesitation. A house I designed board by board, nail by nail, knowing exactly where the light would fall in the mornings. Tonight, I'm sitting on the edge of a sagging motel bed, eating cold soup straight from the can. The room costs $40 a night. The walls are so thin, I can hear the man next door crying himself to sleep. Sometimes I wonder if he can hear me doing the same thing, breathing too quietly, afraid that if I make a sound, I'll finally break. Everything I lost, my marriage, my business, my home, my children, was taken from me because of a lie so elaborate it almost erased me completely. And the only reason I'm still standing is because my family refused to let me disappear when I had already given up on myself. My name is Danielle Foster. I'm 45 years old, and what happened to me sounds like something ripped straight from a true crime documentary, but it's real. Every part of it. And I need to tell this story because what was done to me is far more common than anyone wants to admit. It all came crashing back into my life 2 weeks ago, at exactly 2 a.m. There was a knock on my motel door. The Starlight Motel isn't the kind of place where good news shows up at that hour. I assumed it was a mistake, or the manager, Mrs. Chen, coming to tell me my payment bounced again. Or someone looking for the last tenant, maybe a dealer, maybe someone dangerous. Instead, I opened the door and found a man in a tailored suit that probably cost more than everything I owned combined. He knew my name, Danielle Foster, he said calmly, like we were meeting over coffee instead of in a hallway that smelled like cigarettes and regret. I told him flatly that if he was there about money, he was wasting his time. My bank account had $12 in it. That's when he introduced himself as a private investigator and told me that my ex-husband had never had cancer, that the illness I destroyed my life to save him from never existed, that my divorce, my financial ruin, and my children being taken from me were all part of a long, calculated con. And in that moment, standing barefoot on a motel carpet stained by other people's failures, I realized my life hadn't fallen apart by accident. It had been dismantled on purpose, before the motel, before the canned soup and the paper-thin walls, before I learned what it feels like to be a grown woman who can't even promise her children she'll be okay. My life had a rhythm. 18 months ago, I was proud, quietly proud, the kind that sits deep in your bones, not the kind you post online. I owned Foster Construction in Denver, not inherited, not handed down, built. I started with a beat-up pickup and the old toolbox my grandfather left me when he died. The first jobs were small, porch repairs, fence replacements, kitchen remodels where clients watched me like I was a novelty because I was a woman swinging a hammer with certainty. I learned early to let my work speak. Every clean cut, every squared corner, every deadline met. Eventually, the word spread. We became known for custom residential homes, the kind where people pay for craftsmanship, not shortcuts. I had 8 guys on my crew, solid, loyal, the kind who show up early and stay late without being asked because they care about the build. My foreman, Rick, had been with me almost a decade. He wasn't just an employee. He was family in the way that matters. Present, steady, protective. And then there was my house. I built it myself about 12 years earlier. Every board, every nail, every detail, mine. The kitchen window positioned to catch the morning light, the staircase railing sanded until it felt like silk under your palm. The workshop I added when my son was born because I wanted a place to build with my hands when my mind got too loud. I still remember walking my father, Jack, through the finished rooms. He'd run construction before me, back when everything was done with hand tools and stubbornness. He inspected my work with that practiced eye, then nodded once and said my grandfather would have been proud. That one sentence warmed my chest for years. My family life wasn't flashy, but it was full. My husband Ryan and I had been together since high school, 22 years of marriage. We were the kind of couple people described as solid, and I believed it. We had 2 kids, Tyler, 14, all long limbs and restless energy, studying his football playbook at breakfast like it was scripture. And Sophia, 12, who had my mother's musical gift, first chair violin in the school orchestra, despite being the youngest one there. She played like she was telling secrets she didn't have words for. Mornings were chaos in the best way. Coffee brewing, Tyler asking where his cleats were like he hadn't worn them yesterday, Sophia reminding me, politely, like a tiny adult, that her rehearsal was moved up 30 minutes. Ryan leaning against the counter, watching me move through the routine like I was built for it. Some days he kissed my temple and called me his rock. I held on to that word when everything started to crack. Sundays were sacred. Dinner at my parents' house, my mother Linda cooking enough food for 20 people like she was feeding an army. My brother Kevin showing up with his wife and their 3 kids, grease still under his nails because he was a mechanic and somehow always had an engine to fix. After dinner, we'd sit on my parents' back porch, the kids running wild in the yard, while my dad told stories about the old days. The air smelled like grilled meat and cut grass and safety. That was the foundation of my life. Work I earned, a home I built, a family that showed up. So when Ryan came home one afternoon from a doctor's appointment, crying so hard he could barely form words, I didn't hesitate. He said they'd found something during his annual exam. Something bad. 2 days later, we were sitting in an oncologist's office at Denver General while Dr. Michael Wong explained that Ryan had stage 3 cancer and needed aggressive treatment immediately. I remember details I wish I could erase. The buzz of fluorescent lights, the anatomical posters, the way Ryan's hand shook in mine, damp with sweat. Dr. Wong spoke like he was reading stock numbers, clinical, calm, efficient. The prognosis was serious but treatable if we acted fast. Then the numbers came. After insurance did what it was willing to do, we'd still be responsible for over $300,000. Ryan collapsed in the parking garage afterward, pressing his face into my chest, sobbing about not wanting to die, not wanting to miss Tyler graduating, not wanting to miss Sophia's wedding someday, not wanting to become a memory. I held his face in my calloused hands, looked into the eyes I'd fallen for when we were 17, and I made him a promise. I told him I would do whatever it took, sell whatever I had to sell, work until my bones gave out, because he wasn't going to die on my watch. And in that moment, I believed love meant sacrifice. I just didn't know who was counting on that sacrifice the most. That first night after the diagnosis, we spread the insurance paperwork across our kitchen table like it was a puzzle we could somehow solve if we stared at it long enough. Coverage limits, deductibles, exclusions written in language designed to confuse and exhaust. I ran the numbers 3 times, hoping they'd change if I was more careful. They didn't. Insurance would cover maybe $60,000. Everything else, over $240,000, was on us. Ryan sat across from me, shoulders slumped, eyes dull like someone already halfway gone. He kept apologizing for getting sick, for being a burden, for ruining everything. Each apology felt like a small knife. I reached across the table and took his hands, grounding him the way I always had when he spiraled. "We'll figure it out," I said, firmer than I felt. "We have options. The house has equity. My business is strong. This isn't the end." He nodded, but he didn't look at me when he said he loved me. I noticed that. I just didn't let myself care. What I did notice, what I told myself meant nothing, was how quickly he reached for his phone once we finished talking. He turned slightly away, voice low, saying it was his sister in Portland checking in. It was past midnight there. She would have been asleep. When I mentioned that, he smiled too quickly and said time zones always confused him. I let it go, because fear does strange things to people. and I wanted to be kind. The medical bills didn't trickle in. They hit like a wave. $47,000 for diagnostics, scans, consultations. I drained our entire savings account, $32,000, and put the rest on 2 maxed out credit cards. The numbers blurred together. It didn't feel real. It felt temporary, like I was holding my breath underwater and would surface soon. Then Dr. Wong called us back in. He explained with the same calm tone that there was an experimental treatment protocol showing remarkable results. Newer pill combinations, tumor shrinkage rates over 70%. Not FDA approved yet, which meant insurance wouldn't touch it. How much? Ryan asked, gripping my hand status. My fingers went numb. $180,000, Dr. Wong replied, like he was talking about the weather. Ryan immediately shook his head, saying it was too much, that we couldn't do that to the kids. I cut him off before he could finish. His life is worth more than money, I said. When can we start? That was the moment everything tipped. I sold my construction equipment first. The excavator, the dump trucks, the crane, the specialized tools I'd saved years to afford. The equipment that separated me from every other small contractor in Denver. I posted everything online on a Sunday night. By Tuesday afternoon, buyers were lined up. It gutted me. But I told myself equipment could be replaced. My husband couldn't. I called my clients, explaining delays. Mrs. Henderson, whose dream home I was building, told me to take all the time I needed. Family came first, she said. The commercial developers weren't so understanding. They pulled their contract immediately and demanded their $50,000 deposit back within 48 hours. Just like that, months of income vanished. Then I had to let my crew go. 8 men, some with me nearly a decade. I gathered them in our office trailer on a Friday afternoon and told them I had to shut operations down indefinitely. No speeches, no drama, just the truth. Rick spoke first, offering pay cuts, reduced wages, anything to keep the team together. I told him it wouldn't be enough. They filed out quietly. Rick stayed behind, rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when something bothered him. "Danny," he said gently, "something about this doesn't add up. The timing, the numbers, it feels wrong." "Cancer doesn't care what adds up," I replied. And I meant it. By the 3rd month, I listed our house. The one I built. Tyler found me standing in the workshop, staring at my tools like they might disappear if I blinked. He asked if we were really moving. I told him it was temporary, that we'd build something even better once his dad got better. He shook his head and said he didn't want better. He wanted home. So did I. But I kept selling, because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You don't question. You don't slow down. You don't look too closely at the cracks forming under your feet. By the time I put our house on the market, my body was running on instinct alone. I didn't sleep. I forgot to eat. I existed in a constant state of motion. Calls, paperwork, payments, signatures, because if I stopped moving, I might have to feel what I was doing. The house sold in just 2 weeks, $420,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage, we cleared $305,000. Every single dollar went to medical treatment. We moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment downtown. Thin walls, flickering hallway lights, questionable neighbors. Tyler and Sophia shared a room for the first time in their lives. Sophia never complained to me directly, but I heard her crying late at night, muffling the sound into her pillow so her brother wouldn't hear. I'd lie awake listening, my chest tight, telling myself this pain had an expiration date. Ryan would get better. This would end. One evening, my father showed up unannounced. He found me boxing up more tools to sell, my hands shaking from exhaustion. He didn't yell. That somehow made it worse. He told me he and my mother had $50,000 saved, that they wanted to help. I refused. I told him they needed that money for retirement, for emergencies. He slammed his hand down on the table, hard enough to rattle the boxes. I hadn't seen him do that since I was a teenager. "Forget your pride," he snapped. "You're drowning and refusing the life preserver." I I still said no. I told him my husband was my responsibility. He looked at me like I'd missed the point entirely. Family is all of our responsibility, he said. I wish I'd listened. The hardest thing to sell was my wedding ring. Ryan had given it to me when I landed my first major contract. Platinum band, 3 carats. He'd promised I'd never have to take it off. I sat across the counter at Steinberg's pawn shop, sliding it toward Mr. Steinberg, who'd known my family for 40 years. He examined it quietly, sadness in his eyes. It's worth about 8, he said, then paused. I'll give you 15. I tried to refuse the extra money. He wouldn't let me. This isn't charity, he said firmly. It's an investment in a good woman having the worst year of her life. I combined that money with $10,000 I got from secretly selling my father's vintage motorcycle, something I still haven't forgiven myself for. And it covered another month of treatment. And then the reports started coming back positive. Ryan was responding beautifully. Tumors shrinking dramatically. Dr. Wong showed us scans that made Ryan cry with relief. Full remission within 2 months, he said. We'd beaten it. I felt nothing. Just exhaustion so deep it scared me. That was when I noticed Ryan changing. The way he looked at me, like I was a reminder of something unpleasant. The way his phone lit up constantly with messages he smiled at but never explained. He said it was his cancer support group, other survivors, people who understood him in ways I couldn't. 6 weeks after his final clear scan, I came home from a day labor job, dirty, sore, barely upright, and found suitcases on the bed. Ryan was packing with cold precision. The apartment smelled strongly of his expensive cologne, the one he'd stopped wearing during treatment, but had suddenly started using again. I asked if we were going somewhere, a trip, a celebration. He didn't look up. I'm leaving you, he said. The words didn't register at first. My brain refused them like a foreign language. I reminded him, quietly, desperately, of what we'd just survived, of what we'd lost, of what we were supposed to rebuild together. That's when his eyes were ice. He told me to look at myself, to really look. A woman working cash jobs, living in a dump, wearing the same 3 shirts on rotation because she'd sold everything else she owned. I reminded him I'd sold everything to save his life. He laughed, not softly, not sadly, cruelly. A real woman wouldn't have lost everything, he said. A real woman would have found a way to keep her business, her house, her dignity. Then he said the name that made my stomach drop. Brianna Caldwell, his divorce lawyer. The one with billboards all over the highway. The one who understood his potential, who saw what he could become without me dragging him down. The divorce papers were already prepared. Full custody of the kids, spousal support, a percentage of my future earnings if I ever managed to rebuild. I told him he couldn't take my children from me. He told me he absolutely could and would. When he walked out that door, suitcases in hand, I sank to the floor and realized, too late, that the cancer hadn't been the inciting disaster. It had been the opening move. I didn't scream when the door closed behind him. I didn't throw anything. I didn't collapse into hysterics the way movies suggest betrayal should look. I just sat there on the floor, my back against the bed, staring at the indentation where his suitcase had been. My heart felt strangely quiet, like it had stepped outside my body to watch from a distance. 14 months. 14 months of dismantling my life piece by piece to save his. And he walked away like I'd been a bad investment. The first coherent thought that came was ugly and automatic. What did I miss? I replayed every conversation, every hospital visit, every night I'd fallen asleep at the kitchen table surrounded by bills. I wondered if I'd pushed too hard, if I'd become someone unrecognizable under pressure. If loving him so fiercely had somehow made me disposable. Then my phone rang. I called my brother Kevin within minutes of Ryan leaving. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. He drove over immediately, read the divorce papers in silence, his jaw tightening with every page. When he finished, his face was red with anger. "This is insane," he said. "He can't do this. You saved his life." I laughed weakly. Apparently that's what made me pathetic. Legal aid assigned me a public defender named Patricia Ellis. She was young, overwhelmed, and brutally honest. She reviewed my finances with a sigh. "No assets, no steady income, and your current living situation won't meet minimum custody standards," she said. Meanwhile, Ryan had already moved into a status in the suburbs with Brianna Caldwell. The custody hearing came fast. I wore my only suit, the one I'd kept for funerals. Ryan showed up in expensive designer clothes I'd never seen before, standing confidently beside his lawyer. Judge Morrison presided, known for putting children's welfare above all else. Ryan testified first. He painted me as unstable, financially irresponsible, possibly depressed. He said I sold our family home without consulting him properly, made reckless decisions that left our children without security. His tears came at just the right moments. When I tried to explain the medical bills, Brianna cut in sharply. "Where is the proof?" she demanded. "Where are the medical records?" She claimed Ryan would have survived just fine with standard treatment, that I chose excessive measures that bankrupted our family. Then came the worst part. Tyler and Sophia had to testify. They wouldn't look at me. When asked where they wanted to live, Tyler's voice was flat, rehearsed. He said his dad's house was better, that I could visit. Sophia just nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. The ruling came quickly. Full custody to Ryan, supervised visitation for me, child support I couldn't afford, 30% of any future income. I told the judge I didn't even have $500. She told me to find employment. That night, I moved into the Starlight Motel, room 107, $40 a night. The owner, Mrs. Chen, didn't ask questions, just handed me the key and said it was the quietest room. It smelled like old cigarettes and defeat. I sat on the bed and called Kevin, told him I'd lost everything, my kids, my marriage, my life. "You still have us," he said. "As long as you're breathing, this isn't over." I whispered, "Fight back with what?" He answered without hesitation, "With family." But sitting alone in that room, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I had already given up on myself. The days at the Starlight Motel blurred into each other until time lost its edges. I worked whatever day labor I could find, loading trucks, hauling debris, scrub status this used to be my competitors' projects. Cash at the end of the day, no questions asked. I ate canned food because it was cheap and didn't require energy I didn't have. Some nights I didn't even turn on the TV. The silence felt more honest. My family kept calling. My father, my mother, Kevin. I stopped answering. Their concern made everything hurt worse. Every "Are you okay?" felt like proof that I wasn't, that I'd failed so completely they could hear it in my voice even when I said nothing. Meanwhile, Ryan didn't stay quiet. His lawyer sent follow-up notices about support payments, emails reminding me of my obligations, thinly veiled threats about contempt of court. I read them sitting on my motel bed, my phone shaking in my hand, wondering how a woman with $12 in her account was supposed to pay $500 a month. Ryan's friends, people who'd eaten at my table, let me watch their kids, started posting photos online. Backyard barbecues, smiling faces, new furniture, new cars. Ryan in the center of it all, relaxed, thriving, like the last year hadn't happened, like I hadn't happened. I heard through Kevin that Ryan was telling people I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I'd become obsessed with money, that I'd lost perspective and ruined the marriage myself. His family backed him completely. His mother told mutual friends she'd always worried I was too intense, too focused on work, not feminine enough. That one stung more than I expected, because somewhere deep inside, a small, poisonous voice whispered, "Maybe they're right, status." I started questioning my own memories. Had he really been that sick? Had I exaggerated? Had I made choices too fast? I replayed moments, hospital hallways, pill bottles, the way he'd flinched before appointments, and wondered if I'd filled in the fear myself. Then one night, around midnight, there was a knock on my motel door. Not the life-changing one, Just my neighbor asking if I had a lighter. His eyes were red. He smelled like alcohol and loneliness. I handed him a lighter and he said, "Rough time?" I nodded. He said, "When he walked away, I realized something terrifying. I was becoming someone people recognized as broken on sight." 3 weeks passed like that. I stopped answering everyone's calls. I stopped hoping. I stopped planning. I existed. That was all. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., there was another knock. This one felt different, sharp, deliberate. When I did, a man in a tailored suit stood in the hallway. Posture straight, expression professional. Not motel professional, courtroom professional. He looked at me like he already knew everything. "Danielle Foster?" he asked calmly. I told him if he was there about money, he was wasting his time. My account had $12 in it. Then he said something that made the hallway tilt. "What I'm about to tell you," he said, "will rewrite everything you think you know about your husband's illness, your divorce, and why he really took everything from you." He came and laid documents across my bed. Bank statements, offshore accounts, photos, text transcripts. I laughed at first, a short, broken sound. I told him he was wrong. I'd watched Ryan vomit. I'd held him while he cried. I'd seen the scans. William didn't flinch. He explained, quietly, methodically, that Dr. Michael Wong was Ryan's second cousin, that they'd planned this for over 2 years, that the treatments were saline mixed with medications designed to mimic side effects, that the scans were altered images from other patients. The house, all of it. William told me my father had suspected something was wrong when Ryan refused to let him attend appointments, that he'd hired William 6 months ago, that they'd been waiting, carefully, for proof that would stand up in federal court. Then William showed me a video. Dr. Wong confessing. I sank onto the bed, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. My entire life hadn't collapsed. It had been stolen. After William finished laying everything out, the room went very still. Not quiet, still. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, my hands dangling uselessly between my knees, staring at the documents scattered across the blanket. Numbers, dates, names. Proof stacked so neatly it felt obscene. My brain kept trying to reject it, the way the body rejects poison. This can't be real. I had watched Ryan retch into hospital trash cans. I had felt his ribs under my hands when I held him at night. I had memorized the rhythm of his breathing when he slept, terrified it would stop. I had looked death in the face and believed it was standing between us. And now I was being told it had all been theater? William spoke again, gently this time, explaining how the medications worked, how vomiting could be induced, how rapid weight loss could be manufactured, how anxiety could be chemically amplified to look like genuine terror. He said Dr. Wong had prescribed everything under the guise of managing side effects. I stopped listening halfway through because something inside me finally broke. Not in a dramatic way. No sobbing, no screaming, just collapse. I folded forward, my elbows on my knees, my forehead pressed into my palms. And for the first time since Ryan had walked out, I cried. Not pretty tears, not quiet ones, the kind that tear out of your chest and leave you gasping, humiliated by how much pain your body has been holding without permission. My shoulders shook, my throat burned. I tasted salt and blood and cheap motel air. I cried for the woman who sold her house believing she was saving a life. I cried for the mother who stood in a courtroom watching her children repeat lies to survive. I cried for the version of myself who thought love meant endurance at any cost. William didn't interrupt. He stood near the door, giving me space, like someone who had seen this kind of devastation before and knew better than to rush it. Eventually, the sobs slowed into shallow breaths. My head throbbed. My knuckles ached where I'd split them on the wall. I whispered the question that had been forming since the first document hit the bed. Did my kids know? William shook his head immediately. No, not until recently. He explained that my father had been meeting with Tyler and Sophia quietly for months. That 2 weeks ago, Tyler caught Ryan shredding documents late at night. That something about it scared him enough to call his grandfather. That was when my father showed them the truth. They were safe now, William said, at my parents' house, waiting for me. I should have felt relief. Instead, guilt crushed me. I pictured Sophia crying into her pillow in that apartment. Tyler standing in a courtroom, repeating words that weren't his. I'd let this happen. I'd been so focused on saving a man who never needed saving that I hadn't protected the two people who needed me most. That realization hit harder than the betrayal. For a moment, a long, dangerous moment, I thought about staying in that room forever. Room 107, $40 a night. No decisions, no expectations. Just existing quietly until the pain dulled enough to feel like background noise. It would be easier to disappear than to stand back up and face what had been done to us. William broke the silence. There's one more thing, he said. I almost laughed. Of course there was. He handed me a set of keys. My truck keys. He told me my father had been maintaining it this whole time, that the house I sold, the one I built, had never actually left the family. My father had bought it the same day it went on the market, using a shell company so Ryan wouldn't find out. I shook my head, overwhelmed. Why didn't he tell me? William's voice softened. Because you wouldn't have believed him, and because pride can be as dangerous as despair. Then he told me about my crew, Rick. Every single one of them. They'd been meeting at my father's house every Sunday, turning down permanent jobs elsewhere, working day labor, just like me. Waiting for me to come back. That was the moment I cracked open again, but differently, not downward, up. Because I realized something through the exhaustion, the rage, the grief. I hadn't been abandoned. I had been carried. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something other than pain. I felt the faint, terrifying beginning of resolve. William stood and slid the final document toward me. It wasn't another bank statement or another transcript of betrayal. It was a property deed. My name was on it. The house, the one I'd built, the one I'd cried over as strangers walked through it with measuring tapes and polite smiles, had never truly been lost. My father bought it the same day I sold it, hiding the purchase behind a shell company so Ryan would never suspect it. The lawn had been mowed, the pipes winterized, the workshop left untouched, waiting. I pressed my thumb against the paper, grounding myself in the reality of it. You can go home, William said quietly. Home. The word felt fragile in my mouth. Then he told me about what was about to happen next. At 6 a.m., less than 4 hours away, federal agents would arrest Ryan and Brianna Caldwell simultaneously. The charges were already prepared. Medical fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and custodial interference. Dr. Wong had been taken into custody the day before. His confession was on record. The custody order, the one that had gutted me, was about to become irrelevant. My brain struggled to keep up. I asked what would happen to the money. William told me most of it had been moved offshore, but what they'd been able to freeze would be returned as restitution. Enough to rebuild. Enough to breathe. Then he handed me one last thing, a business card. On the back, in my father's familiar handwriting, were the words, "A woman isn't measured by what she loses, but by what she's willing to sacrifice for family. You sacrificed everything. Now let your family help you rebuild. Come home." I sat there for a long time after William left, alone, processing. The motel room felt different now, not like a grave, but like a cocoon I was finally ready to tear open. I showered for the first time in days, letting the hot water wash away the smell of cigarettes and despair. I put on my last clean shirt, wrapped my split knuckles. When I stepped outside, my truck was waiting under the streetlight. Same crack in the windshield where Tyler had accidentally hit it with a baseball 2 years earlier. I ran my hand over the hood like it was something alive. I drove to my parents' house as the sky began to lighten. Tyler and Sophia ran toward the truck before I could park. Sophia threw herself into my arms, sobbing apologies she didn't owe me. Tyler hugged me harder than he ever had, his voice breaking as he told me he'd known something was wrong, that the way his dad laughed about selling our house hadn't felt right. My father stood on the porch, calm and immovable, like a general who'd finally won a silent war. Inside, my mother made breakfast. My crew was already on their way. Then my phone rang. Agent Sarah Coleman, FBI. Ryan and Brianna were in custody. With the evidence they had, both were looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The money was frozen. I'd need to give an official statement that afternoon. 6 months later, I'm standing in my rebuilt workshop, my hands resting on the same workbench where I taught Tyler how to hold a hammer. Ryan got 12 years. Brianna got 15 and disbarment. Dr. Wong lost his status forever. But none of that is what healed me. Healing came on a Saturday morning, building a bookshelf with my kids. When Tyler asked how I could ever trust again. Trust, I told him, but verify. Sophia asked if I hated her father. I told her hate would give him power he no longer had. I feel sorry for him instead. He had a family who loved him unconditionally, and he threw it away. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves, quiet at first, then unavoidable. By the time the news broke publicly, Ryan's carefully rebuilt image collapsed in a single news cycle. Headlines didn't use my name much. They didn't need to. The story was bigger than me. Local man and prominent divorce attorney arrested an elaborate fake cancer scheme. Friends who had once filled his backyard for barbecues deleted photos overnight. Comments vanished. Invitations dried up. The same people who'd nodded sympathetically when he called me unstable suddenly remembered details that hadn't sat right with them. His family didn't call me, not once. But I heard through Kevin that his mother locked herself inside her house for days, that his sister stopped answering her phone. That shame moved through them like a sickness no one knew how to treat. In court, the truth landed heavy and final. Every forged record, every offshore transfer, every text message mocking my exhaustion. The audio of Ryan laughing about me crying at the pawn shop played in open court. I sat behind my attorney, my hands folded, my face still. I didn't need revenge. The truth did the work for me. Custody was returned without a fight. No dramatic speeches, no apologies from Ryan. He didn't look at me when the judge ruled. He stared straight ahead, his confidence gone. His shoulders slumped like a man finally realizing the floor beneath him was real. When Tyler and Sophia walked out of that courthouse beside me, their hands in mine, I felt something close to peace for the first time in over a year.